number 5. All right. So as I was saying, in the global scale, a healthy soil throughout history was mitigating the negative repercussions of the global warming and served as a permanent sink of atmospheric carbon. However, the role of the human factor is so strong for the change in the land use and the used agricultural technologies have a very significant impact on the soil stocks of carbon. On this slide, you can see the dynamics of the changes in the organic matter in the soil due to the changes in the land management and land use. Native soil is in the state of equilibrium, and the natural carbon stocks can be in the state of equilibrium. But if we till the soil, we see the dehumidification of the profile, and the carbon gets emanated from the soil. Soil lives in such a way that it still retains some stock of carbon that can never disappear. And if we apply some imprudent tilling of the soil, we'll still arrive to a quasi-equilibrium state, and the delta of organic compounds will still be in the equilibrium state. The stocks of carbon will be on a sustainable level. But if we employ humus-preserving technologies, or if we do not use the soil in the agriculture, the organic matter and the organic carbon will be sequestered again, and the soil will come again to the state of quasi-equilibrium. Here in this country, in mid-1950s, and you probably remember that, especially the older generation, the campaign for taking the virgin land was implemented, and during a very brief period of time, for about only a decade, about 45 million hectares was tilled in such locations of the Soviet Union as Kazakhstan and other locations. The soil lost approximately 5 centimeters, and the losses were up to 1.5 tons of carbon per year. Kazakhstan has a drier climate, and the carbon losses were slightly less. Using the reference data, when virgin lands were tilled, for the first 10 or 20 years, every hectare lost approximately 35% of initial organic matter. In the national report published in 2018, it was shown that in Russia, the soils and pastures lost approximately 20% of organic matter in the top layer and approximately 16% of organic compounds from the underlying layer. Following our assessments, the reverse process starts when the soils become abandoned. This process started in 1990s due to the economic situation, and in the wood soils in the Costa Rica region, the carbon stocks in the soil began growing, and these stocks are growing almost in a linear fashion, and after 40 years, they will be almost equal to what we have in a mature forest. However, the sequestration will decrease, and the maximum sequestration of carbon will be within the first 20 years, after which it will start decreasing. Same correlations were shown in the gray forest soils in the Moscow region. Here on these two charts, you can see the carbon stocks increasing with the aging of the deposit, and you can see the sequestration rate of carbon decreasing over the years. The longer the period of the deposit, the slower the rate, and after some time, it will come into the state of equilibrium. If we leave degraded arable soil under a deposit, you can see it as one of the carbon preserving technologies, especially in the first years after the abandonment. On this slide, we have generalized the sequestration rates for three types of soils: the pod soil, the gray forest, and the black soil. And you can see the change in the carbon sequestration rate, grams per square meter per year. And I will go on with the next slide, where we try to analyze the situation with our soils. We use the RODC model for repeated agricultural use. And we showed that if we use both young and older deposits and abandoned soils, we will see similar tendencies and similar trends if we sow various crops on in the process of crop rotation. If we don't sow perennial grass, the carbon sequestration will be negative. Same data you can see here in the crop rotation. We saw several times of crop rotation in the same types of soils, in the same fields, and we can see that the sequestration of carbon in abandoned fields, we can see only in the hay and pasturage crop. Considering this situation and considering the significant role of soils in the global cycle of nature, considering its potential in the climate change mitigation, following the climate summit in Paris of 2015, the international soil community launched the initiative 4 per mil. Unfortunately, I was not present there, and I have my doubts whether or not I should repeat the findings of the summit. So even if I reiterate some positions, the mission of the initiative was to show that the condition of agricultural soils may play a significant role both in providing the food security and in the issues of climate change. Its mission was to append the necessary measures to decrease the greenhouse emissions on the planet. The initiative provided the possibility to all its participants and partners to implement the practical programs for sequestering and depositing the carbon in the soil by using soil preserving technologies and other alternative methods such as precision farming, organization of forest strips, and many others. Going on with the numbers of 4 per mil, the global emission of CO2 was 8.9 gigatons of carbon per year, and the deposit, the stocks of carbon in the soil in the layer of 0 to 2 meters was 2.4 gigatons. One number divided by other, and we arrived at the number of 0.4%. In order to compensate the emission of CO2 from combustion of the fuel, it is necessary to increase the carbon stocks in the soil by 0.4%. Of course, these numbers are very tentative, but they show you the scale, and the number is achievable, especially in the initial periods. And they show the necessary amount of carbon to be deposited and sequestered in the soil in order to balance the CO2 emissions, if not to balance it to zero, but at least to cut it down. The initiatives of 4 per mil for Russia shows some different values. Considering the smaller anthropogenic impact for CO2 emissions, and considering the much larger organic carbon stocks in the soils of Russia, the 4 per mil actually translates into 2 per mil for Russia. This data is given in the article by Ivanov and Stolbovoy in 2019. And these two authors also say that the soil has its own limit of absorption. The agrarian sector of the Russian Federation is a considerable source, is a significant source of greenhouse and climatically active gases. And I think I will continue from where the previous speaker said. The emissions amount up to 79 million tons of CO2 equivalent for the year 2020, which is slightly more than 3% of the anthropogenic emissions of CO2. This is secondary data with which we can work, and this is a value that we can take as the value to be decreased. The regenerative or soil protective agrotechnologies is a tool to increase the carbon absorption capacity of the soil. This is the focus of many scientific researches and many conferences, and this is shown in the works done here in the Samara region. The principles of regenerative farming is minimization of tilling, application of long-term crop rotation, inclusion of legumes and perennial cultures with a high share of subsoil feeder mass, securing of high density of sowing, and the return of byproducts of the crops to the soil, use of new types of fertilizers, and plant-based biostimulators of new generations. If we apply these, we will achieve our results in a short-term perspective. Here on this slide, you can see that the tillage of the soil, quote, kills, unquote, atmosphere. Regenerative atmosphere provides sequestration of CO2 and retains the water, whereas the traditional conventional technologies of tillage result in degradation of soil, result in emission of CO2 to the atmosphere, and result in erosion and drying out of the soil. The soils begin to be much more susceptible to the climatic changes, to desertification, and to loss of moisture. As we say, the conventional technologies result in the destruction of health of the soil. This slide gives you an outline of the correlation between the depth of tillage and the losses of its properties. In the work of Japanese researchers, some 10 years ago, a comparison was made between approximately 30 pairs of samples. It was shown that the zero to intensive, zero to medium, and medium to intensive tillage resulted in various stocks being deposited in the soil. The difference is significant. Sometimes the application of no-till technologies may result in the implementation and achievement of results of the 4 per mil initiative. Generalized foreign experience in more up-to-date articles shows that the rates of carbon sequestration in the change of and the replacement of traditional conventional tilling technologies to soil preservation technologies shows the average rate of carbon sequestration at 0.26 tons per year. And the Russian experience shows up to 1.5 tons of carbon per hectare per year. This is explained by the fact that the Russian soils are much more degraded than worldwide. The result of application of soil preserving technologies can be as follows. Sustainability of crop farming, increased by productivity of agricultural crops, depositing of organic carbon in the soil, decrease of CO2 emissions and other GHGs due to reduced number of tillage, decreased demand in mineral fertilizers, and on the whole, we will see the improved health of degraded agricultural soils and the restoration of the soil fertility. This will result in the increased quality and competitive capacity of Russian agricultural products, which might be attractive for small and large producers alike. The forecasts made by the American scientist Lau in 2020 showed that with the implementation of agrobiotechnology, which create a positive balance of carbon in the soil, the carbon depositing capacity of soils worldwide might be up to 333 billion tons or 4 billion tons of carbon annually. This is a significant value, and but we can trust this very distinguished author. As far as decarbonization of agricultural industry in Russia, we also performed some calculations, and we demonstrated that when switching over to modern agrobiotechnology, approximately 50% of arable soil, the decrease in the level of GHG emissions might be up to 50 or 60% from today's volume. And the carbon stocks in the agricultural soils might grow by 8 to 12 million tons of carbon per year, which will improve the agricultural industry, which will make the agricultural industry carbon neutral. However, the implementation of the soil-preserving technologies are quite complicated. It's not an easy process. In this country, as you know, there is no normative and legislative base on switching over to high-performance and environmentally friendly agricultural farming. The expenses on re-equipment of agricultural enterprises to modern technologies are quite high. The expected effect from the implementation of modern agro-technologies is not momentary. It can be achieved in over the horizon of 3 or 5 years. And the positive effect might be decreasing after 20 or 30 years due to the achievement of the natural level of soil saturation with carbon. However, we can and will improve the carbon sequestering capacity of the soil. Regenerative farming and nature-like technologies is a win-win strategy which benefits all, the producers, the society, and the nature. Living in harmony with nature instead of using nature is the mechanism that is capable of stopping the climatic catastrophe. And we will always have an advantage and a great success if we manage our opportunities in the correct way. We should make use out of soil rather than abuse it. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you, Elena Nikolaevna, for your very interesting report. Do you have any questions to the presenter? Thank you very much, Irina Nikolaevna, for your report. As usual, highly informative and very interesting. However, your figures, your numbers, when you were quoting the changes in the carbon flows in different kinds of sowing, to what extent did you consider the weather conditions during your measurements, and how much can they affect your forecasts across various climatic areas and zones of the country? Oh, thank you very much for your question. The question is quite clear, but the answer would be based not on calculations. It is based on the so-called model of 20. The climatic conditions are considered in it. Our calculations relied on a standard climatic model, but it also considered different scenarios which were taken into account by the guidelines. So what we could see, we tried to demonstrate not the climatic change per se, but even with that, I do not think its influence will be a radical one. But we should understand that when we do the parameterization of the model, we take experiment-based data we take the evidence-based data and we populate the model with them. How much do these data match between the experimental data and the observation data? Well, we do not run experiments on various technologies. For over 15 years, we have been looking at carbon dynamics in micro conditions, but in tillage, we did not have our own observations. So the objective of our work was to analyze what we will have if we start farming the abandoned soils. And perennial cultures, meadows and pasturages would be best if they are used, whereas some soils would behave best if they are left alone. The soils which have accumulated some carbon or are accumulating some carbon, they will start losing it, and this logic is quite legitimate and proven. Thank you very much, Irina Nikolaevna. I have a couple more questions. The first is, well, in your slide, you showed some recommendations using biofertilizers, for example. Do you have any actual data as to how much biofertilizers are used at the moment? No, we do not have this research data. My slide contained a generalization of research. I do not know whether we have such research data. Our experimental fields, our experimental camps are nearby, but they became abandoned due to the due to underfinancing of the early 2000s. We do not have our own research on soil preserving technologies. My final question, it is from our chat. Do you analyze the emissions with different structure of the arable soil usage? And do you consider the impact of the structure of the soil cultures on the development of of cattle breeding? No, our research did not encompass the structure of arable soil use. It considered different parameters, for example, the initial condition of the soils, the climate. No, if I understand the question correctly, speaking globally, and speaking about global assessment, which is given in my report, I'm a little at a loss as to what this question refers to. Maybe it refers to the model. Okay, maybe maybe the person who asked this question will specify it. Thank you very much, Irina Nikolaevna. Let us move on to our next speaker. Additionally, Lyudmila Vladimirovna organized our conferences and gives the opportunity to all stakeholders involved, to scientists and to businessmen. And it is a pleasure to mention that our business and our science walks ahead of our foreign partners. The floor goes to Mikhail Sturkin, the CEO for Marketing and Development of Fosagro. Dear colleagues, good morning. I am going to talk about the assessment of carbon footprint from using the mineral fertilizers and about the carbon polygon of Fosagro. I don't think I need to give an introduction to what Fosagro is. We are one of the largest manufacturers of mineral fertilizers. We're an active player on the international market, and we participate actively in the environmental agenda. The questions of sustainable development and food security are among the priorities of our company. In 2018, we joined the CDP platform. Our carbon rating was raised to B level in 2021, which means that Fosagro is working on a qualitatively new level. All the production facilities of Fosagro comply with the best available technologies and the most stringent environmental requirements. The ESG agenda is in the DNA of the company, and it's among the priorities of the company. We planned a decrease of GHG emissions by 14% versus 2021. In absolute units, it's 830,000 metric tons of CO2 per year. Our polygon is capable of sequestering 1.2 million tons of carbon. So actually, we're speaking about carbon agri-holding or about a large forest. The major objective of this is the deposition of carbon. When implementing such projects, one has to remember that small errors result in big losses. So one should not dissipate their attention to small projects, but to focus on the solutions which are easily scalable, which have good economic and social value, which are tried and tested, and which are feasible in the short time possible. We believe that forests and agricultural crops and cattle breeding are three major points to be pursued. We as a company see other projects as scientifically interesting, but the implementation of projects in them is not among our priorities. We pursue something which can be fast implemented and which can generate fast results. These are questions of our own competences, i.e. planting of forests, intensive farming, in combination with regenerative farming, in which company is also highly experienced, resulting from photosynthesis and resulting from soil and plant respiration, CO2 gets emitted. This is also related to the soil biomass and soil degradation. So the soil is an accumulator that can deposit the charge of organic compounds, and the intensive agriculture will deplete this charge quite fast. The forest is a system for fast absorption of GHGs. And we do not consider effective NO2 is much more active chemically as compared to CO2. Making products with a smaller carbon footprint is beneficial for all the humankind, and mastering technologies with decreased CO2 and NO2 emissions is one of our priorities. We are constructing a new forest polygon, which will be situated 120 kilometers away from Cherepovets on the territory of the Vereshchagin Agricultural Academy. And then there will be the agricultural stationary facility to study the agricultural crops. These are created in order to forecast the carbon budget of the Vologda region and the assessment of the decrease rates of GHGs and CO2, as well as assessment of the nutrition systems for the agricultural crops. We will also study the effect of mineral fertilizers, search for the minimization of carbon losses, probably technologies for multi-cycling in agricultural technologies, and working with a negative carbon balance. We will also study the impact of the carbon polygon on the environment and see the dynamics of regional pollution of environment to evaluate the local pollution and creating the digital twins of the polygon. As soon as we accumulate sufficient data, we will be able to cascade this experiment to larger scales. We did the sowing and planting of the trees and stationary and legume cultures. This will be used in the non-used and abandoned soils. These are agricultural lands and the territories which do not yield any significant use at the moment. But if we sow them with perennial cultures, we will be able to earn some carbon credits. And the value will be up to 18 euro on the voluntary market. So this will result in creating more jobs and sale of carbon credits on the internal market, because as of today, the domestic companies have to buy them in Brazil or India, where the carbon markets are formed. For us, as a production company which supplies fertilizers to different countries worldwide, especially in Europe, it's highly important for us. However, we will need to decrease our own emissions of GHGs. So we will implement the resource saving technologies. We will minimize the resource consumption and produce the fertilizers with the least carbon footprint. For instance, the fertilizer for wheat. With the prudent selection of fertilizers, it is possible to decrease the carbon footprint by up to 30%. So we will raise awareness of our consumers as to how to apply our fertilizers to minimize the carbon footprint. We use organic and mineral fertilizers. We use the method of inhibition and nitrification. In other words, the research is underway on recarbonization of agricultural soils. May I say that in the year 2022, FOSAGRO launched several laboratories for soil research. They joined the efforts of several agricultural institutions. This is a joint project with FAO. It will study a sustainable management of land resources. We want to achieve a result in planting the valuable sorts of trees, combining this value with the positive impact of sequestering and depositing the organic carbon. We expect some results within 2 or 3 years, and the total area of our projects is 65,000 hectares. We believe we will have some questions. My question is to Mr. Sturkin. Considering the quotas introduced in December last year, what is the percentage of FOSAGRO for internal and external market? Well, the quotas are provided by the Ministry of Agriculture, and they apply to all companies to ensure the maximum use by farmers and agri-holdings of, and I think that the percentage would be approximately 30 to 70%, 30 inside Russia and 30 outside. So when the quotas were introduced for this year, there are some volumes which are identified by the government in million tons. Do you consider that we will have the same ratio between the internal and external market? Well, the quotas are made based on many years of practice, and they rely on the necessity analysis. In some years, we will arrive at the volume of 8 million tons. I think that the norms of application of mineral fertilizers will only grow on the Russian market, considering that we're expecting a record-breaking crops of 130 million tons next year. So I think that the consumption will grow. Our company relies on the internal market as the priority market for us. And it's based on the data from situation centers, which are located across Russia. And the number of personnel of these centers is approximately 1,000 people. Thank you very much. More questions? Before asking my question, I would like to thank you for a very interesting report, for the attention given by FOSAGRO to communication with FAO and the Regenerative Academy. But can you tell me, and for us, it is important to hear that in order to use it in our carbon calculator development. We want to have data on the carbon footprint of the major products manufactured by FOSAGRO. Do you have a roadmap with specific indicators as to when you want to decrease your carbon footprint by the year 2030 in your main products? Well, as I said, the goal of our agricultural polygon is to determine the carbon footprint of our fertilizers and to recommend to agricultural producers the optimal recipes for using our fertilizers, the combination of fertilizers with biostimulators, and so on. I'm sorry, but I will reword my question. My question concerned carbon footprint of manufacturing your fertilizers. My question, your report was on their application. Well, our task is to decrease our carbon footprint by 14,000 metric tons versus the values of 2018. Two more questions. You said you are increasing the lineup of your fertilizers. Are you going to manufacture organic fertilizers? Yes, we will. We are in the process, well, we actually have launched this year in cooperation with BASF. We started up the carbamide with limas inhibitor. It's being sold worldwide, and it will be sold in the Russian market next year. We have an agreement with Bisoldi, and I think that by the year 2024, the Fosagro lineup will have a fertilizer with biologically active additives. In the beginning, you spoke about do you have an understanding of what
только на территории Российской Федерации, и мискантус может использоваться для производства ПЖ в нефтяной промышленности. Мы эти ПЖ пока покупаем в Японии. И вот как-то выстроить такую цепочку, даже растительность поглощает, а потом еще перерабатывается, используется в промышленности.
So you also mentioned the application of different plants, for example, with cactus, and it is quite important for us because we use it in different types of industry. And besides, we now have to buy it from Japan, and we want to stop doing that. We are an agricultural company, and we are mainly concerned with crops to be given to the livestock. But of course, we are considering different other types of crops. However, as I've already said, we are now actually doing theoretical research, and the carbon polygon will start only in autumn. But of course, we are now considering all the questions which are very important. So we'll now look at the chart if there are some questions. Mikhail Vladimirovich, what regions do you practice conservation agriculture, and where do you plan to develop it? As I already said, we are polygon in the Volогодskaya region. And at the end, we plan to establish a carbon farm there. So we are, of course, a commercial company, and we are interested in the profit. That's why we are, of course, invest in the research. But in the end, we need to have a profit. I would like to add a question to the previous one. We spoke about miscanthus, and we also have a question on whether we should take all of the plants that are grown there in 20 years. Will it be utilized? What will happen to them? So the question is whether it will be utilized or processed. Or probably we will. Well, it is now too early to forecast what will happen and how we will utilize these plants. And that's why we are actually establishing this carbon polygon. We cannot say what
Такой хороший диалог, действительно нужно думать.
happen in the future. Thank you for this interesting dialogue, because we really need to understand how the market should develop. We should also think on how these plants are to be used in the future and how they are to be processed. Do you have any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And I'm giving the floor to Margarita Redina, an expert on the body of validation and verification of the Ecology Institute of the Russian Institute of the Russian Organization. Good morning, friends. I'm very happy to see you. Thank you. Actually, the reports are really practically oriented, and they are indeed very interesting. And now I will have my report, and it will be quite complicated, and it will be quite theoretical, because we are in the beginning of the road, and we should understand that Russian system of validation and verification of carbon standards has been formed only in the year 2021, and we can now evaluate the system. I hope that the system will continue, but we have to believe that it is only in the beginning. And my report is concerned with the validation and verification of carbon credits. And I would like to point your attention to the fact that the title of validation is not very correct, because we cannot actually validate carbon units. And I will explain to you, we cannot validate projects, we can validate units. And I will explain why. So let's start. Last year, there was a law being published on the limiting the emissions of greenhouse gases. And it concerns the agricultural activities that is associated with the emission of greenhouse gases. The law puts limits on several types of activities, and these are actually bodies that are enumerated in the law more precisely. This law will help to set the relations between the emitters and those who assess and evaluate these emissions and those who reduce them. The next slide, you can see the scheme of this system. So first of all, we have the sources of greenhouse gas emissions. There are, of course, anthropogenic resources, but of course we know that there are natural resources as well, and it is very difficult to assess them. And our colleagues are right, because the accuracy is absolutely different. And unfortunately, the methods are not of very high accuracy. On the other hand, it is quite easy with anthropogenic resources if we consider the evaluation. Yes, indeed, there are methods of assessment and there are different sources. Still, this system is developing more rapidly, and we hope that this will also improve. As for the emissions, it is the first step. There is an inventory of anthropogenic gas emissions, and there is also the register where all the information is stored. There is also the inventory of other anthropogenic emissions, and this is an information system that is formed based on the national statistics, and it is systematized in a particular manner that is set by the standards. All this information is contained in the register, and there are also there's also information on the ecological processes and projects that are aimed at decreasing the amount of emission. Then the organization gets some points in the register of the units, and in such a way they can decrease the amount they emit. There is another notion I would like to point out. This is a carbon unit. It is a verified result of a climate project. If we speak about what a carbon unit is, you see that in the term there is a word verification, and that means there should be some verified bodies that are to to actually deal with this process. When these units are created, there should be the owner. This owner creates this carbon unit, and then this carbon units can be monitored, and then they can be put into the register, so to say, register. After they are verified. There is also the notion of the operator of person who actually realizes and implements this project. And recently, there has been a law on the 11th of May 2022, and this was the law on setting criteria of a project being implemented to be regarded as a climatic project. This document includes precise information on the criteria of climate projects and how it can be implemented and registered. Then we will speak about the law of the greenhouse gas emissions, and it corresponds with the structure that I shown on the previous slide. Here you see the major requirements to the decrease of greenhouse gases emissions and the ways the government should regulate it. In this slide, you see the obligations of the government of the Russian Federation and federal bodies in the area of decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. It is said that governmental bodies on standardization should deal with the evaluation of these projects, because we think it's very important for the regulation of this project. And the calculations that are to be done should deal or should take into account the Russian system of standardization. This document also includes the rights and duties of legal and individual entities in the area of decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. And it is important that entities in the industrial activities are to set and documents with the information on their emissions. And this also make them decrease the amount of greenhouse gas emissions they produce. Besides, that has been published there associated with greenhouse gas emissions. Not that high, not that long, but it covers the major sources of emissions, and we can really work with them quite efficiently. This also includes agricultural activities, livestock, but it is actually it is the only point which is connected to agriculture. But as we have understood during the conference, agriculture is one of the major sources of the emissions in general. That's why this position should not be the last, but it should be one of the leading. And as we have understood, if we implement climatic projects in agriculture, influence of the greenhouse gases flow. Then this law also includes the basic rights and duties of the entities that have to deal with greenhouse gas emission activities. And as I have already said, today we do not have accurate methods to evaluate these gases. And as a result, we do not have actually the detailed measures to evaluate greenhouse gas emissions and also the result of the projects. The situation is quite a difficult one. However, today we are observing quite a growth of these methods, and we think that work will continue. And our body is actually dealing with this work. We are working on the methods to evaluate emissions. Now, this law also includes information on the register of the greenhouse gases.
И опять же здесь уделяется значительное
Quite a lot of attention
верификации
is
данных.
attributed to the verification of the data. But then it also has information on the register.
Здесь обязательно указано, как должен открываться счет, как фиксируются данные, как
This information includes the information
углеродных единиц.
on the way an account to be opened and how the
более
units are to be verified. It's very important that the law to include all the steps on how this information is to be organized, so we have the standard and we have the data to work with. There was a register, and you see it. It was a carbon units registry.
Имеется в
And
виду,
now it's not the registry we are speaking about in the law. There will be a new register, and the government is working on it. This and on the 30th of April 2022, just recently, there has been published the requirements to the establishment of the register. And here we see the major points and the major duties of each operator in working with the register. And he actually has a good number of operations to be done. And that is the way the system of carbon units registration is to be organized. The verification is the next issue. And we will speak about it a bit later. In general, we should also have full information when we input a project in the register. There should be the executive of the project, the times, and also the name, the date, and the practices that are to be implemented. Then the register should also include the data on the positive effects of a project after the implementation of the project. And this conclusion should be done by a body that is certified to conduct this work. And now we see the opening of such bodies. There are a lot of organizations that are interested in establishing it. And the first one was actually established on the basis of our university. And we are now actively cooperating with different organizations from different bodies, from different entities. We have about 27 areas of work, and it is quite a new step for Russian validation bodies and we're quite proud of that. In general, this organization that is to verify and validate carbon units takes quite a responsibility because this should prove that the project has been really implemented and decreased the carbon load on the environment. Then we have the following information about the project. There is another point on and you see in the law that there is also a point on the data, on the information about the body that verified the carbon units. So it is clear that our organization takes the full responsibility for the success of the project. And here you see this is the internet page of our body, and you can download it, but the whole process is depicted in the next slide. So the first step is the preliminary discussion between the body and the executor of the project. Then this organ has to assign the head of the working group to work with the project, and then next step starts. It is the process itself. First of all, it's necessary to make a plan on the validation and verification. We inform our clients on this plan, and it includes the data and all the information.
Огромный набор шагов,
All the
действий.
information necessary for this process. So you see that all the steps here are enumerated, and that's why it is standardized. The next stage is the validation itself. You understand that it's a small block here, but in fact, we need to do a huge work in terms of quantifying, in terms of analyzing, probably in terms of physical analysis on soils. And here we see how good the project is and how quickly we can achieve the tasks. The fourth stage is the conclusion and the issue of the validation certificate. And that is how step by step we organize this process of validation. Verification is actually, of course, verification is the last step because we need to have an independent body as well to assess what we have verified. Same complicated system that combines several blocks is associated with the verification process. So first of all, we have the preliminary discussion with the client. Then it is the verification itself, and there are a number of steps which we need to have before the decision, before actually the conclusion is reached. I'd like to say that one organization cannot combine the functions of validation and verification because these are two independent processes. That's why we, of course, need partners that will work together with us. So that's all. Thank you very much. We would be very happy to cooperate with organizations and other companies who are ready to implement this projects in order to assess their footprint. And we are now dealing with this project, and this is one of our priorities. So you see my contacts. I'm ready for the future cooperation. So do you have any questions? Thank you very much. It was a very interesting
На вас
and
особенно
useful report. You paid quite a lot of attention to the carbon, to footprint, to the verification, and we are at the university ready to but my question is, how quickly can we introduce how quickly can we introduce the parameters of carbon footprint to be on a systematic level for companies? Oh, very much for the question. Um, I'm very happy to see you, and I'm always happy to see you on conferences. As for the questions you asked, now we are developing the third generation of different guidelines, and it is clear that these carbon footprint parameters are to be assessed. I'm not the creator of them, but I will of course work with them, and our students are sure to work with this information. And I think that this will be a very important step for those who will deal with climatic projects. Another question is,
процедуре
if you
промышленных комплексов в широком плане, да, не только тех, кто работает на земле, тех, кто обеспечивает.
so
У
if
вас
we
какие-то такие
think
индикаторы
about
по
agrarians, agronomists who are working on the land,
чтобы
do you have some indicators that can be applied to them so they can see what types of equipment, what types of fertilizers they should
их уже
use, so they actually have less carbon footprint? In fact, I'm not working on these dictionaries, on these guidelines, but I think these guidelines
конкретно технологии наиболее
actually help to find the best technologies that decrease the carbon footprint.
Представляйтесь.
Здравствуйте, Владимир Платонов, Самара.
Good morning, this is Vladimir Platonov from Samara State University. The question is, do you have any successful experience, real verification of some projects in practice, and are there any potential? Well, for the clients to have the first clients, we unfortunately cannot say who it is. It is possible only after they agree to publish the information for the open public. But now, unfortunately, we do not have any organization now that can correct the standards. One of the reasons is that the standards have just been published. And so, what is the time frame of the verification process? Well, it depends on the scale of the work, on the organization,
они
on
хотели
the
бы
task, because this organization should put a particular should give us the task, what they want from our organization. So what they want from the verification. Do they want to prove the use of the climatic project, or do they want to sell carbon credits or so? So there are many questions, and we should be very attentive considering what we assess and evaluate. Of course, I want to assure you that it will not take years, but unfortunately, I cannot give you a one answer. Yeah. Okay,
Спасибо
thank you.
большое, Маргарита Михайловна. Можно еще один вопрос? Наверное, вы знаете,
My last
в
question.
сентябре был принят первый в мире
Last
запрос
September,
Российской Федерации о
the
цифровом
first
экономике. Вы сказали, что готовится
standard was
рассчитываете этот вопрос
accepted in Russia in terms of
Или
affecting carbon footprint.
будет в основу создания такого цифрового двойника
And
производства той компании, которая к вам
so there was a state standard on the digital
который компания генерит в процессе производственной деятельности.
twin, and I'm going to verify this system as well. Well, it is indeed very interesting for us to work on the project, but it depends on a particular organization and on the way they want to deal with this verification. Of course, it will be interesting. So actually, everything depends on the task. Am I right? If they're ready to open all the processes, or you work with them. Am I right?
В целом, да, то есть заказчик сам решает,
Yes,
как он
you're right. It is the client to decide how they want to use our services.
демонстрировать его всему миру, но ради бога, мы только за.
Хорошо, спасибо большое. Уважаемые друзья, есть еще вопросы?
So are there any
Если
questions?
нет вопросов, движемся дальше.
So now let's move on.
Слово Хомякову Дмитрию Михайловичу, профессору кафедры общего
And
земледелия.
we give the floor to Dmitry Mikhailovich Chomykov, Professor, Department of General Agriculture and Agroecology of the Soil Studies Faculty of Moscow State University. Soils in the National System of Spatial Data, Problems of Adequate Assessment. Dear colleagues, can you hear and see me very well? Yes, we can, but not much light on your side. Too dark. The camera is aimed at your window and your silhouette is dark. Okay, that's better. Dear colleagues, can you please switch on my presentation? I will tell you a few words of introduction. I'm very glad to see all of you. Very good to see you all in good health. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity of participating in this forum that's been running on a regular basis. And we are very glad to be involved and to make our contribution to tell about our results. It's quite clear that the problem of food security due to the latest events is again one of the vital problems, even though we understand that even in the year 2019, we could see that the problem of hunger, which was formulated in the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, to be eradicated by 2030, we will not be able to deal with it. Then we had COVID, and then we have this February situation, and now everyone is talking again about the coming hunger. And behind all these conversations, behind the wall of this conversation, we started remembering that we have degrading soils, we have degrading landscapes, and that we need to supervise the condition of our soils. We started speaking about the scarcity of land resources, and we began saying that we need to restore our landscapes and to monitor the condition of our soils. It's quite obvious that the soil is the largest depository and the largest repository of information about life on Earth. I don't think that anyone in this audience needs a broader explanation of this. Nevertheless, the soil is the basis of functioning of not only the biosphere on the whole, which sometimes remains forgotten and which sometimes remains forgotten by the decision makers, but soil is also the basis of all the food systems worldwide, and we need to have a very clear understanding of this. When we're speaking about carbon footprint, when we think about soil protective farming, about ESG technologies, and so on and so forth, soil is the producer of food products that will be used by the people in full amount. And we know that The soil is a depository of carbon and other elements on the one hand, other elements constituting the GHGs, but soil is also an emitting agents of GHGs. And when we are using nitrogen fertilizers, when we are using organic fertilizers, on the one hand, we are increasing the productivity of the soil, and on the other hand, we increase the emission of a very substantial component, the NO2, into the atmosphere. Do we need to derive from that we need to stop using fertilizers? By no means. And today's situation is an indicator that the grain market worldwide is practically the market of fertilizers worldwide. 1 kilogram of NPK spells 7 or 8 kilograms of grain. One must never forget about this. And when we look into the questions of today's conference, when we look into the agenda of this conference, we need to keep this in mind. Manufacturing of nitrogen fertilizers and manufacturing of other organic fertilizers will grow. And in our country, we need to put things in order as far as the use of organic fertilizer is concerned. Now, the Duma is regarding a draft project saying that the manure generated by poultry and cattle is not a waste, but a resource. And this is perfectly true. In agriculture, one must remember that the non-accountant for rotation of organic remains of manure in the country's agriculture is 2/3 of their volume. And we introduce about 70 million tons of it goes back to the soil, and 60% more is not accounted for. It decomposes, and all the gases produced as the result of this emission goes back to the atmosphere. One must understand that we treat our soils in a very bad and unresponsible manner. We do not control the reproduction of fertility and the washout of nutrient elements from the nutritious soil, which is much higher than the mineral fertilizers introduced to the soil. We heard that the priority of mineral fertilizers to be supplied to the local market is the priority. Even that being considered, we need more active components per hectare of our crops. We still have a lot to consider, and we have some room for improvement, as it were. We understand that our soils are sick, quote unquote, and we give the qualities of something alive to our cells, which is perfectly true. We used to say that a disease or a sickness is something that only a living person or a living organism can have, like an animal or a human being. But today we speak that soils are also sick at the moment. And I believe that this position is, it holds true. So what the diagnosis is and what the treatment should be. In order to do our treatment, we need to make a diagnosis. In order to make a diagnosis, we need to do some survey. So what about the availability of information, even about the presence of soil resources that are used in agriculture? It's quite clear that we have certain signs that soils are not used for their direct purpose. But at the same time, we keep saying that the forests that grow in the agricultural lands can be considered as forestry facilities, and as such, it stimulates the reallocation of arable soils, which are the national wealth of the country. reallocation of these areas to carbon polygons. But dear colleagues, let us think what we are going to do: to feed the country, to provide food to the market, or grow forests in arable lands. This is a rhetorical question, and it has not found a response neither in scientific community nor among the decision makers. These are some indicators that I spoke about, which show the improper use of the soil. It's been said more than once that we have a strategy for low carbon development of Russia. And a colleague of mine said it in the previous report. There are some criteria for sustainable or green development. And these criteria are focused on attracting not only state, but also private investments to the respective spheres of business. So what are the criteria? Among them, we have agriculture. This by no means constitute everything that we need to consider. But nevertheless, there are some points which need consideration. But this is not the end of story. The story goes on about us not having a digital profile of arable soils. We do not know where exactly they are located. We do not know their specific borders, to say nothing about their properties, and so on. So only now we started creating the unified federal information system about the agricultural lands and lands used for agricultural rearing. This law went through all the stages of development and adoption, and the federal agency Roskadastre, which has been appointed to collect information about the agricultural lands, about arable soils, and about property located in the agricultural lands. Well, this is a 100% state-owned company that does this kind of work. So when we speak about the calculations, about modeling, we need to understand with what scope of areas we are dealing. The area of arable soils is 116 million hectares. But what about the rest of the gap between the statistics and the actual sowed land? And I'm not speaking about 132 million hectares of arable soils, which was in 1991. There were new functions given to the Ministry of Agriculture of the Russian Federation. Currently, they are aimed at augmenting this work, including the capabilities given to us by Decree number 731, i.e. on introduction of abandoned arable soil that had been in operation before. But some of the previous speakers said that the number there was 32.7 million hectares, and this area has to be reintroduced into operation by 2030. Only this year, the cadastral accounting and the state subsidies were covering only 250,000 hectares. At this rate, by the year 2030, there will be nowhere near solving this task. However, we need to understand that on the 28th of February, the interest rate on loans was increasing. Now it is 11%. The situation has changed, and now the state subsidies, well, they will be used. They will be cascaded down to the administrative units of the Federation, but with the implementation of any kinds of decrees and instructions, we will have specific problems. The government has increased short-term subsidies for the sowing campaign in the amount of 20 billion rubles, but the situation has not seen its solution as yet, and this needs to be accounted for in our forecasts, both for inventorization of arable lands and for the agricultural production on the whole. We can skip these couple of slides. These are our plans of the Ministry of Agriculture for the creating of digital profiles of our soils, for the implementation of precision farming. We need to remember that digital technologies are regulated by the Ministry of Agriculture, and not a single technology is not listed on the list of best available technology. What they have is slaughtering and skin processing, but nothing about farming and soil protection. Nothing is on there. Nevertheless, on the level of our Interparliamentary Assembly, on the level of the Community of Independent States, we spoke that we need to introduce a precision farming. And we've been recommending the usage of satellite or precision farming in the countries, in the countries members of the Eurasian Economic Union. But we've already mentioned that we do not have digital profiles of soils, and it is not known how much our soil resource is. I do not think we have any digital solutions that can be cascaded to the gigantic areas of arable soil in Russia. Probably some local questions can be resolved by this, but it is premature to talk about a complete outreach to all the territory. Dear colleagues, I beg that you excuse me if I ran out of my time, but I tried to focus on pivotal points that are my key concerns. Thank you very much, Dmitry Mikhailovich. Any questions to our speaker? If we have no questions, then we can discuss a little bit. I have seen some slides from two of my presentations, one from the Analytical Center at the Ministry of Agriculture, and one from my work at the Higher School of Economics. Yes, I did take these materials from the parliamentary discussions. Yes, I did take it from there, and I am pleased to use, and I'm pleased to take some results of your work. Yes, you shared some points of concern, and you probably know that Ministry of Agriculture has its own digital profile of agricultural lands. The Ministry of Nature has their own. The Ministry of Labor has something like that. Different ministries monitor the land resources. In 2020, there was a decree of the government that proposed unification of uniting these resources in order to create a system for accounting the land facilities and the parameters of these land assets. And such parameters as fertility of soils were also accounted in that system. Do you have any information as to what happened as the result of work of this pilot project? There were 8 regions that were engaged in the project. Yes, I do. Deputy Minister Vyacheslav Lebedev introduced this accounting system of the Ministry of Agriculture. Then we had a phase of the year 2020, and we spoke that this was this was a very effective and efficient system. I discussed it with Vyacheslav Ivanovich himself, and I spoke about it with different audiences and even on parliamentary hearings. I said that, well, we are going to have a clear picture of the condition of the soils, about the capabilities of production, about the processing capacities in different regions, about marketing dynamics, about the supply and demand. And that would be a powerful system that will enable complete automation, or at least support to decision making. But as usual, our plans, we aimed for the best, and you know the rest. Even today, having our space technologies, as of today, we can only speak about identification of sowing areas in 4 regions on Russia, and even with that, not in full amount. In Kaliningrad region, which was taken as a small region for this pilot project. And at the moment, this united digital platform, the latest story of this year, it was intended to create a sort of a program where the agencies would populate which would be populated with spatial data from various agencies, and there we would have a unified center for the collection of this information. But you know that this is a tremendous task to bring together the disjointed data from different agencies. But then this company was created, Roscadastre. It is now waging a pilot project with 4 regions, and well, it utilizes state financing, and the Roscadastre reports to the Rosregister. It will establish the boundaries, and it will identify the property complex. But we know that the Rosregister at the moment, and I will give you just one example, only 40% of boundaries between the administrative units of the Russian Federation have been digitized. Only 40%, nothing more. Example number 2, and I'm not going to dwell anymore on this one. 23 million units of assets in the Rosregister are not assigned to any owner. But we are only in the beginning of a long road. It's good that the state understood the necessity of these steps. The road is going to be bumpy. As our colleagues say in Kalmykia, let our road be a wide road. Yes, you said that the pilot has been started for 4 regions. You know, it's the objective of Roscadastre. It's about digitizing the accounting books. It's about accounting of the assets. Do you think they will be able to create a system which will use spatial data and using that forecast the yield of fields. Probably something that was digitized since 1930s. It will be used, but now we will need to implement new technologies. We are in the 21st century. We need to utilize new technologies. As I said, we are in the beginning of the road, and by now we are only forecasting our yield in the form of forecasts and expert assessments. But one shouldn't be too complacent about the rate of these solutions, about the fastness of these solutions. Unfortunately, we lost connection with our speaker. Okay, then we will move on.
Коллеги, а кто в дистанте, слышно нас?
Как-нибудь отреагируйте, пожалуйста.
Да,
Да,
слышно
всё хорошо.
прекрасно.
Хорошо, спасибо.
Да,
Спасибо
слышно.
большое.
Вполне слышно, только Хомякову Дмитрию Михайловичу не слышно.
Спасибо большое. Дмитрий Михайлович отключился. Тогда подождем, может быть, он вернется, мы продолжим диспут. Но я...
Now we turn to the next presentation. I now give the floor to Natalia Trot, the Dean of the Agronomic Faculty of the Samara State University. She will speak together with Natalia Buchkina, Deputy Director on Research Work of the Agrophysical Research Institute on Food and Agrophysical Work. So they will present the experience of the Samara region on the on identifying carbon soil. So, thank you, colleagues. We would like to present the research we conducted together. Two universities worked together. This is the Samara University and the Agrophysical Research Institute of St. Peter. In the beginning, I would like to speak about the types of soil in the Samara region. They formed in the conditions of the moisture deficit when there was not enough carbon, but the precipitation and the general conditions allowed the black soils to form quite successfully. And one of the greatest soil scientists of Russia, Mr. Depth pointed out that Mars had quite rich black soils. However, now we have about 1% of what we were at the beginning of the 20th century. In general, black soils make about 70% of the total soil reserves in Samara. The amount of humus is middle, but if we consider the rate of Dokuchayev, he pointed out that there were about 18% of organic matter humus in the soil. Now, the amount has decreased significantly. There were different types of black soils, and you see the things on the slide. I would like to say that the alkaline and typical black soils are actually those that were analyzed in our research. Our university is deeply connected with the farmers. We have the following problem. We are in the position, we on the one hand need to protect soils, but on the other hand, we should produce enough yield, and besides, we also need to get a profit. So somehow we need to combine all these aspects. And the projects we have are aimed at being of no. First of all, it's the problem of agro improve the soil amelioration. Also started the project with Ms. Arlova. This was the research on the retrospective analysis of soil in your farm where they use conservation agriculture. Besides, we study the possibilities of carbon sequestration of soil. We conducted this research together with the Agrophysical Institute of St. Petersburg, and my colleague Natalia Kuchina will present the results. Besides, Samara State University also helped us to analyze the soil samples. The first part of the research has already been conducted. This is the retrospective analysis on the Orlovka farm. As I have already said, we organized some, as I have already said, there were expeditions in our region. So the history of soil is quite rich. Many of the results were saved in the archives, and in the middle of the 20th century, we organized an institute on schools that organized these expeditions to analyze school. Our retrospective analysis was conducted with the help of the archives of this institute. Basic data were analyzed as 1952. But in order to see the correlation and to see the dynamics, we used the data only since 1974, so the period was 40 years. We did that in order to conduct a research and monitor and put a monitoring fields on the territory of the farm. Here you see here's the historic overview of the farm. As for farm, retrospective analysis to be obligatory when we, if you want to implement an MRV project. So this is the historic overview. In 1929, since 1929, these soils were transferred from one farm to another. And it is important that probably there could be some changes in the technology that influence significantly the structure of soils. In order to organize this retrospective analysis in 2021, together with our research scientists, we analyzed 48 soil profiles and combined it with the data of 1974. We took also the data from the existing sources, but we also carried out our own. Here you see we put coordinates of the points that were put that were used in 1974, and we analyzed the samples from the same points in 2022. So this allowed us to see the dynamics. And here you see also profiles that were studied. We organized morphometric characteristics of soil, and besides, we described all soil horizons. We found the minerals that were the soil forming minerals were alluvial minerals from different periods. Carbonates are hydrocarbonates, and they are widely spread in the territory of the farm. This is the mineral that was the basis for as for the mechanical composition, we also analyzed them, and all the components are the combination of alkaline and black soil. And as you understand, this black soil is actually the most precious material of our region. Besides, during our research, we classified the samples. Here, you see the point where we took samples and they put on the map. Here, you see different types of soils we used and the classification we conducted after the research. And for each type of soil, we make a description of the soil profile. As for the morphology of soil, we pointed out the following. There was a change in the structure of soil horizons, and less organic structure was formed. We described soil aggregates and the information contained in our report. We identified different layers and the water structure, also the conclusions of the dynamics of the water and the structure of soil engineering. We made conclusions on the possible reasons of work to be done. In order to interpret the analytical data, we took the data and the figures we had in order to see the dynamics since 1974. In particular, I will show you the dynamics. Currently, so we see as for the dynamics of the soil changes, you see that since 1974, there was an increase in hydrogen concentration. So without a lower pH. But since 2002 till 2021, this pH became more alkaline. And this is very important for our team, for our topic, because we're discussing the changes of carbon in soils with the help of conservation agriculture technologies. Here you see the data, and it was taken from our report, and the last figures is the actual of human substances of organic matter. And it is clear that not all types of soil behave in one way. You see that there was a particular difference in terms of alkaline and medium black soil types of land.
Черноземов увеличили свою...
You can see that a number of black soil increased the concentration of substances up to 2.8%. Because of that there was an increase on the soil with high level of irrigation. So probably there were the process of recultivation of them. As I already said, that there were a lot of farms there. Unfortunately, I do not have details on the technology, but here you see that this source have shown maximum increase. We can also say that all the soils that were attributed to humus soils, now they can be put into the category of medium and high humic soils. Yeah, you see the dynamics of the concentration of carbon. Also, we have information the dynamics on the flows of the minerals, especially on phosphorus and potassium. We unfortunately do not have, we wanted to analyze nitrogen, but there was no data for the period since 1972. But generally, we plan to analyze the nitrogen dynamics in the future, and 2021 will be actually the first point. Here you see the dynamics of phosphorus and potassium, and the concentration in general is medium. The trend is presumed, so we do not see a significant change. Also, the same for it is also the same for the potassium fuels. Here we see a decrease, and that means soils need more minerals.
Говорит о том, что
This is probably how to strategies. As for the minerals, we also see that there is quite an observable trend. We see the changes in structure. The structure of the soils have improved, so we can say that this technology has helped to improve the quality and structure of soils. After that, as a conclusion, we can see that this research helps to see there are major changes, and these are the starting points for future analysis when we try to analyze how conservation agriculture practices influences the concentration of carbon. So this is actually the end of my presentation. I'm going to give the floor to my colleague, and before I want to show you to see the next step of our research. We have identified the points of carbon, the points of soil sampling, and you see them here. And my colleague will speak on this future, but I will speak about another project we are going to implement in our region. We are going to start a plant of forest windbreaks. It is going to be implemented in the region in January. It's a very important agriculture as well, because we have observed dust storm in the farm, and this farm actually was a very big one, and it is half of the region, and they addressed to us so we can find solution dust storms. And we have a group with a carbon polygon, and she showed us this dust storm in Kazakhstan, and the same video we observed in our region. So you can see it was the wheat, which was quite successful, but now because of that storm, that you see how nature influenced it and how the plants will suffer. So this dust storm absolutely actually destroys plants and all the harvest. We see we need forest windbreaks that will help us prevent these natural disasters, natural events. So we, as I've already said, have two types of work. On the one hand, we need to protect food. On the other hand, we need to work with farms for the sake of fertile soils. So now I'm giving the floor to my colleague. Oh, good morning. So my colleague has said a lot about the work we did, and now I will speak about the modeling of soil carbon we used to model for our research. By the end, of the conference, I can make another presentation of the results of other research, but now I will speak about models that can be used to forecast the changes of soil carbon when we use conservation agriculture technologies. And they can be used later to see the changes of soil carbon. I will miss some of the slides because they have already been discussed. As for modeling, we are now working mainly with the DNDC model. I will speak about this model. I will speak about the data we received and what prospects we have when we work with this model. This model was made in the US. It was set to analyze soils in the US, and it is based on the processes of carbon conservation. It is called denitrification and composition of decomposition. So what data do we need in order to work on this data? It needs a lot of data. First of all, these are climatic we were happy that there was a meteo station allowed to see to find data on climate changes for the studied period. This data can be provided in different forms. We used the minimum and maximum temperature, precipitation, and precipitation. This data is put into the model. Then we get to the characteristics of soils. When we were in September in the farm, we used the density, the soil organic carbon concentration, and some others. This data was collected by my colleague who has just given the presentation. Then the soil samples were analyzed. Besides, we used cameras in order to see the concentration of carbon there. This data was actually the basis of the density model. The climate and the soil characteristics. There is also the part of the model where you are to introduce the type of crops you are using. You need to put all the data you are planting, and we also worked with them. Besides, you need to input the data on our soil tillage and so on. And we are grateful for the local farm, for Ms. Arlova, who provided us with all the necessary information we were able to put into the model. So as I already said, you see that we need to make an input of month, of day, of urea, and of the amount of fertilizer you see. So there is a number of parameters that are to be implemented. We also need to input the irrigation, the flooding, the mulch, and others. As a result, when all the data gets into the model, then you have a file you can download on the practices we applied. This is no-till, conventional till, and others. And all this was summarized, and we could conduct it modeling. This is how you see when the model has operated, and you see the different parameters here are shown. This is the air temperature, precipitation, snowpack, evaporation, transpiration. And here you see also all the other parameters. You see the crops, you see the water stress. I don't know if you remember that, but 2020 and 2021 was a year practically without precipitation, and you see that plants experienced water stress. Besides, you see here the nitrogen stress. At first, there was the increase of nitrogen fertilizers, but then the amount of nitrogen decreased, there was the stress. Then here you see the temperature, the moisture, and other parameters in terms of gases. This model also helps to see the dynamics of pH. It allows to see also the emissions of greenhouse gases. And as you see, the model forecasted the increase to the end of May, the increase of the gases, and it corresponds with relative because it is spring when the majority of gases get into the air. There is also increase in autumn. In the left, you see the dynamics of the organic substances of the soil. Here, you see the humus, the litter, the scrub, the crop, and all that is shown in the model. It shows how it changes. This is the general overview, and of course, all the results we had are shown in the picture. The final result can be seen in the following graph. The basic results are the following: the crop, the balance of nitrogen, carbon, water, greenhouse gases, and that's all. And for each parameter, you have the final result, and you see all the changes. And we observe that last year plants had a water stress. And you also compare it with the demand. For example, last year the demand for the spring wheat was 363 milliliters, while the uptake was 161. And it is also the same for nitrogen. It is also the model that helps to show the maximum grain that is possible and the actual grain yield that we observe. And you see that there is practically a 10-time decrease between the actual and the probable harvest. You can also see on the screen the inputs and the outputs of nitrogen, and there is a resulting influx or outflux of carbon, of nitrogen changes. And you see that the overall change was a -1. So it also helps us to make decisions on the future strategy of application of fertilizer, for example. It is also the same for the carbon balance. You see here the balance is positive. If we compare how much carbon inputs and how much carbon outputs we have.
В 2021 году у нас был. Вот, это водный баланс, как вот вы
We also can analyze the water balance, and you see that as a result, there was a lack of water as the demand of plants decrease was higher than what they really got. We also analyzed the emissions of greenhouse gases. It shows the emissions, it shows the flux rate and net.
Потенциал в целом был вот этом.
Net result we get finally. So we have 130 kilograms of CO2 equivalents per hectare. In general, the model can give you a number of data, but the major thing is that the model should have exact parameters, because the way we do the initial measurements determines what results we have. Natalia Mikhailovna has already shown the map where we took the samples, and you see that here it is here are the fields where no-till was introduced in 2017, and another no-till was introduced in 2014. Then I would also like to show you how DTC helps to see how carbon is absorbed by plants. And these are how we think that both no-till and conventional tillage plants absorbed the same amount of carbon. But if we take roots, we see that there is a difference.
Думаю, что у меня еще пара слайдов и все.
Спасибо большое.
There is also a difference between the results of carbon sequestration by roots in different, depending on the type of tillage. And no-till has a higher carbon inflow for roots than conventional tillage. We also analyzed carbon dioxide emissions from agricultural lands. And as we calculated, we found that traditional tillage results in greenhouse gas emissions that is 2 times greater. Besides, we analyzed the integral, monthly, and yearly emissions of nitrogen oxide from different types of soils. And you see that there is also a big increase, a big difference between conventional and unconventional types of soils. Besides this,
Я тут выделила несколько, простите меня,
to divide carbon into different pools and to analyze it in a differentiated way.
важным, потому что
think
вчера, в частности, прозвучало
we should take into consideration
использование
modeling, which is of very importance. A lot of people take no-till and then they stop using it because they don't understand. They actually don't understand the results. I think that modeling can help here. If they take different scenarios, then they will see that
что модель, она
if they take this practice, they can have better results. And this model can show it in figures. And this model can show the increase in yields than we can forecast if we take conservation agricultural technology. That's why we are so
первых этапах для того,
actively promoting these models, because this will help us see different strategies, and this will see what practices are of particular importance in a particular field.
параметров использования почты, о которых я говорила ранее. Большое вам спасибо. Извините.
Thank you very much thank you very much. I'm sorry that I have spoken longer. That's okay. Now, do you have any questions? Yes, I have one question.
Наталья Петровна, а скажите,
Natalia Petrovna, can you tell me, I've noticed the following. You modeled the emissions and you modeled the flows in the forest, and it turns out that the nitrogen oxide has been emitted mostly from this forest land. So can you explain it? Well, I think that in fact we haven't validated our results. We measured fluxes in September, October, and November. I think that we should work with that, and probably our results should not be considered as that exact. Probably this results, we have this results because of the high level of precipitation, and probably because of the high biological activity. Because I do not have any answers, any other answers to a question why we have such results. Well, yes, but for that way we need a source of nitrogen, because it was very strange for me, because in the fields there should be more nitrogen outflow because of the nitrogen fertilizers, and in your results you have other results. Yes, I agree with you, but we need to continue our research. Thank you very much. I have another question. When Mr. Khomykov spoke, he said that should be an easier way to put organic fertilizers. And there is a new law on this fertilizers application. And can you use this model on introducing changes and recommendations to this new law? And in order to implement these recommendations, we need, first of all, model how these changes can influence the fluxes. So can we use these models for that? Well, in fact, when we did this research, we didn't think about that. But in general, we will think about that. We just had a conference where people have been, where people discussed a lot discuss this issue. They spoke a lot about organic fertilizers, because now what we do with organic fertilizers is horrible. We need to apply them more efficiently. We think that we need to have some criteria that will help us use these organic fertilizers more efficiently. I think here, of course, we need to deal very efficiently with the laws and to work with them in details. Thank you for your report. I have a question. In one of the tables, you noticed that over the last years, there were. Can you show one table? There were results of different types of soils, and you
Традиционно при ноутиль, так скажем, возможно, где-то попали.
То есть это, строго говоря, не гумус, а органическое вещество почвы.
So in your tables, did you have information on humus or organic matter? Well, we actually analyzed mostly organic matter, then humus. So there were some additional materials that were not considered in details.
Ваш опыт по возделывая почвы технологии no-till?
How long did you have the experience of using no-till, and isn't to isn't it too early to make a
Okay, we started with the no-till technology since 2010, and our findings right now are only preliminary, and we need to have a more careful approach to selecting the specimens. And but even the preliminary findings are quite promising. And another thing that we found that we had to be really careful about sampling the soils when we were looking at the samples on the edge of the field, near where the soil is compacted on the boundary between the field and the forest. We saw some decrease of the carbon content. In all the protocols, the emphasis was made that the carbon samples needed to be taken in different positions. As Stanislav Shishov spoke yesterday, we need to make our maps according to these recommendations. Otherwise, we will have inaccurate or invalid or misleading information in quite a large amount. Well, if a farm was doing good, proper land tilling, land farming, then even with the conventional tilling, the humus could have survived and could have prevailed. It depends on how the technology is implemented. Thank you very much. If you have no questions, we will move on. Thank you. Vladimir Orlov, Eurotechnica. Ludmila Vladimirovna, it's my question. Where are you going to make the analysis? In different places in the agrochemical services. We're working with chromatographers. We are working with internationally certified chromatographic services that are available in our universities. So the analysis are done with very high quality. I know it's been a problem with lots of holdings and smaller companies because making an analysis itself is a problem. We had SGS, which used to make some good high quality certified analysis, and it's no longer here. With other analytics, we had lots of issues. Vladimir Platonov, Samara University. I'm working with analytical chemistry. Speaking about the equipment that we have here at the Samara University, equipment we have at the Samara State Technical University, our equipment is enough to perform certified expert analysis of soil, air, and water for whatever components. The important thing is that we have a customer, and we need to certify our laboratory, and it is expensive. It's approximately 3.5 million rubles only for the accreditation of the laboratory, to say nothing about procuring the standard reference specimens. But if we have an order, the Samara University and the Samara State Technical University, we both will be able to do such research according to GOST and beyond the standards set by the GOST. Oh, thank you. Moldova State University can also do analysis for external control. Yes, we know it goes about scaling up these projects. One thing is the laboratories. We have a decision, but we don't have we don't have many laboratories to provide to holdings. So I think it would be a talking point for us to talk about after this conference. Just one more comment. Kontsakov, Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Does the university cooperate with the federal laboratories, with Roslescos? Do you have any communications with them? No, we don't. We communicate with the agrochemical service of Samara and with the reference centers. Людмила Vladimirovna, does any one of the local agricultural producers or scientific organization do they work with the Samara Ministry of Forestry? No. But they have a good, well-equipped laboratory. It's a federal agency after all. They didn't inform us about that. Yes, that's a drawback. That's something to work on. Oh, it's very good that we raised this point. And now we can tell one another what equipment exists where, and who can work with whom. Albert Gareev, first pro-rector of Samara University. The consortium of universities exists in Samara. We cooperate with the Ogarov University of Mordovia, both in our engineering and technical competences, and we are both engaged in the 2030 project. We engage additional financing for that. And the questions that were raised in this discussion, we are aware of them. We see the possibility for expanding our cooperation and promoting federal financing for this project, with emphasis on purely scientific work, with the work with the laboratories. And we will be ready to expand our consortium and to work more actively with laboratories, both with university level and ministry level orders within the tasks that you have addressed right now. For example, for carbon polygons. This is a proposal from myself, and I suggest we put it on our agenda on the Manitsov meeting and discuss it during lunch. May I assure you that we are ready to move forward, to engage additional capabilities, to engage additional laboratories. We are open for cooperation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, we dream of working with a microbiology laboratory. And we have to send our test specimens to Kazan, which is not right. Vladimir was absolutely right. An agrochemical laboratory is obsolete here. And updating equipment here is retrofitting the equipment is something that is very necessary. My next question is, one thing is taking the test specimens and working on them. Another thing is that the results of this work be validated and verified by special laboratories. To the best of my knowledge, we have only 6 of them in the country. One of them is in the responsibility of Anna Romanovska. Are you planning to create your own validation agency of greenhouse cases, or do you validate or verify your measurements with one of the 6 aforementioned agencies? We've been thinking about creating our own agency, but this point has not been studied in detail. Margarita Redina referred to it in her presentation. Of course, this is a very prospective topic, but we haven't reached this point yet. It's still in our projects. Well, let's say we are in the pre-phase.
Располагает опытом работы в этой сфере, да, потому что валидация более формализованный процесс.
Validation is a more formalized process, and verification needs to take into account the industry-specific questions. It's good that we're having such a lively discussion at the moment. I believe we will have such a point in our resolution. And now I'm giving the floor to the international expert who will share his perspective on this information. And I wish it to be a point for international cooperation. We're giving the floor to Guillermo Peralta.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for the organizers for the space. Let me know, please, if my screen is being properly shared.
Да.
Thank you. So, thank you very much. The idea and the objective of this presentation was to summarize the FAO and the ITPS, this International Technical Panel on Soils, on the protocols for the recarbonizations of global soils, just to give a general overview. I'm part of the GSP Global Soil Partnership Secretariat and FAO. And we wanted to start by emphasizing why soil organic carbon is taking more and more importance each day. As we all know, soil organic carbon represents the largest carbon pool in terrestrial ecosystems. About 63% of the total carbon from terrestrial ecosystem is currently being stored in our soils. So even small increases in organic carbon stocks can transform our soils from greenhouse gas source to potential carbon sinks. No, so this mechanism of CO2 sequestration, first through photosynthesis and then being stabilized in soils as soil carbon through the introduction of sustainable management practices, has been outlined as one of the most cost-effective practices to mitigate GHG emissions, as it has been highlighted in the latest IPCC report. Besides the other well-known advantages that we know that bringing or maintaining our soil organic carbon stocks levels brings to our soils in terms of soil structure, improvements in soil aeration, water retention, a filter for contaminants and pollutants, bringing in increased soil stability, improving the nutrient cycling, fostering biodiversity in our soils, as a whole, bringing increase in our productivity in our agricultural systems. So why years ago the Global Partnership has started this urbanization global soils, this Reg Soil initiative, which is mainly a mechanism, an initiative with the aim to boost soil health through the maintenance and enhancement of soil organic carbon stocks. This Reg Soil constitutes mainly a mechanism where farmers are encouraged to adopt sustainable practices to see a yield increase while using less inputs. And these farmers receive technical support and financial incentives with funds depending on each country. So this Reg Soil initiative has different steps. I won't go into the details of the different steps, but mainly first the technical approach, then the farmers come to an agreement with the associations and with the institutions within the country, and of course with GSP, and these farmers provided with technical support and financial incentives, and these farmers can start adopting and upscaling the implementation of sustainable soil management practices. And the measuring, reporting, and verification steps are mainly dividing in that farmers can follow what we call a green path, which we will discuss later, mainly the focus on soil health assessment, or farmers are also able to follow a carbon path where the protocols are focused on the assessment of soil organic carbon changes and GHG reductions and transforming the into potential carbon. So these Reg Soil initiatives has mainly two base documents, the SSM, or Sustainable Soil Management Protocol, and the GSOC MRB protocol, which are used for the MRB process of this initiative. During the whole process, it lasts. No, I mean, it usually these projects are depending on the country between 4 to 8 years. And this Reg Soil initiative uses different sources of information and tools that have within the GSP network. For example, the GSOC, the Global Organic Carbon Sequestration Potential Map, which has been developed using a bottom-up approach, and countries contributing to it. The Technical Manual of Recommended Practices for Increasing Soil Organic Carbon, the International Network on Black Soils, the Soil Doctors Programs, which is focused to enhance local capacities, and of course the Global Soil Laboratory Network, which is involved in the harmonization of the laboratory procedures, especially in the case of soil organic carbon measurements. So, for example, as we have been saying, these Reg Soils are using these tools like the GSOC map, the Global Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration Potential map. Here, in this case, we are seeing that it is showing a very important sequestration potential in agricultural lands of carbon. Here, in the 5 of countries with the highest sequestration potential, and this, as we have saying, these maps were generated by the national institutions to produce a global map, and these maps are helping countries which are getting interesting and being part of this Reg Soil project and initiative to detect where in the country they have higher sequestration potential to start implementing these types of projects. And another important tool has been the development of the Global Black Soil Map, which has been published here in this link I'm giving here. And this is also showing quite important statistics of the area covered by black soils and the importance of black soils for the different countries. And for example, in the case of the Russian generation, estimates are that around 44% of the global area of black soils is held in the Russian Federation, and then 70% of the Russian provinces are under black soils, and that nearly half of all the soil organic carbon sequestration potential in Russian agricultural lands is currently under black soils. So these exercises have been taken for the different countries, and these are showing us the importance of black soils in terms of climate change adaptation and mitigation. So going back to the reg soil, which uses these kind of tools, as we said, there are two main paths, the carbon path and the green path. And this path uses different protocols. The Sustainable Soil Management Protocol in the case of the green path, and the GSOC MRP protocol in the case of the carbon path or way in reg soil projects. So very briefly, this in the case of green path project, which uses the SSM protocol, this protocol you will find and you can download from the link here. It provides key indicators and a set of tools to assess soil functions based on its physical, chemical, and biological properties. It basically sets the methodology to measure soil health by 4 key standard indicators that are going to be used in all reg soil projects, like soil productivity, soil organic carbon, and soil physical properties like mold density, available water, or penetrometer resistance, and soil biological activity determined by soil restoration rate. Also in this SSM protocol, the soil health is assessed by implementing a vision soil health assessment protocol, which has been also been developed by FAO, which basically it gives involved farmers like a traffic light showing whether their soils and in terms of soil structure, soil porosity, color and modeling, and root development are in a poor condition, in a moderate condition, or in a good condition, and also giving a score for these different conditions, being a quantitative assessment of soil health. So those are the 4 basic indicators, plus the visual soil assessments, and the participating farmers of the different projects and experts are also encouraged to include other indicators depending on the identified soil threats for the project, like soil nutrients, soil salinity, soil acidity, alkalinity, the available water capacity, water infiltration, penetration resistance, soil erosion, soil biological activity in terms of enzymatic activity, microbial mass, soil biological activity, and soil pollution. We have 4, let's say, mandatory indicators and other indicators which can be used depending on the project. So, for example, in this case here in Argentina, in some no-till fields with the No-Till Farmer Association Argentina, we have been testing these types of protocols and measuring the impact of sustainable soil management practices like cover crops with different indicators such as infiltration, cover, residue cover, penetration resistance, or the changes in soil structures in terms of appearance, for example, of plateau structure or blocky or massive structure, which are very typical of these no-till systems, at least there in Argentina with the types of soils we have. So that was regarding this green path. As we have said, we have another path for this project, which is the carbon path, this path is based on this GSOC MRB protocol, which has been developed by by different experts around the world and has been published in 2020. And you can download this protocol from here, from this link here. And the objective of this protocol is to provide a conceptual framework and a standard methodology for the monitoring, reporting, and verification of changes in soil organic carbon and GHG emissions from agricultural projects. It has some key aspects that I wanted to highlight. It's only applicable for some types of land and activities. For example, it can be applicable on deforested lands or on lands which have been wetlands and have been drained for agriculture. It has to be applied in a minimum 8-year cycles, and as a general methodology, it includes soil measurements such as soil organic carbon, bulk density, and particular organic carbon, soil organic carbon modeling, and GHG estimates. Now it combines measurements and modeling to estimate soil organic carbon changes and projecting those changes in time. So again, this in terms of the measure of indicators which are measured in the second protocol, basically soil organic carbon, bulk density, and in some projects they are incorporating measurements of particulate organic carbon in the first centimeters. Then those stocks are soil organic carbon stocks are calculated and adjusted by equivalent soil mass, and you will find the different proposed methodologies and sampling designs in this protocol. In terms of the laboratory methods and procedures which are prescribed or recommended in the protocols, the preferred options is the estimation of soil organic carbon content by the dry combustion, the UMAS method, and also accepting alternatives like the wet oxidation, and new spectroscopic techniques. And in the terms of particulate organic carbon, the proposed methodology is following the Camardella-Elliott methodology, using sieves and then determining the soil organic carbon stocks of the of those particular fractions. So based on those protocols, some countries have been interested in this Reg Soil initiative and are starting projects that we are considering these as pilot projects in countries like Mexico, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Kenya. Some of these countries have started these initiatives and are already identifying farmers and location where to start the projects, mainly focusing on the first path that we have been discussed, the green path projects. Now, for example, in the case of Reg Soil Costa Rica, they are focusing on 2 types of systems, on livestock systems and on coffee production. They have been using the tools that were developed at the national scale and integrated into the global products, like the National Soil Organic Carbon Sequestration Potential Map. By this, they have been identified the regions with higher sequestration potential and also higher risks of losing soil organic carbon. And by this mean, they have been studying and identifying the regions which and the farms within the regions that are starting to be part of this Reg Soil project, this national Reg Soil project. They have identified a set of practices, sustainable soil management practices. In the case of grazing, for example, implementing grazing management, leaving fences, using legumes, using forage bridges, so improved pastures, or management, or managing nutrients, improving the management of nutrients to improve pasture production and improve carbon inputs and soil organic carbon contents. And by identifying these practices and defining the cost of these practices, they have already identified the farmers which are starting to apply these practices, and where those protocols are starting to be implemented to monitor report and verify changes in soil health and in soil organic carbon. The same thing for the terms of coffee, identifying the practices, costs, and farmers where to implement these practices. So after all, this is what we really want with these protocols and with these tools, not just to be fancy color maps, not just to be research papers and research material to be uploaded in the net, but to become really useful tools that can be used by farmers on the ground, that can also encourage to take actions, and that can help us to turn our soils from carbon sources to carbon sinks. Spasiba, thank you very much for your time and for attention, and I'm available for any questions that you may have. Again, thank you so much.
Спасибо за доклад, Гильермо.
Thank you very much, Guillermo. Do you have any questions? Yes, I have the first question. So you showed a map where you showed where regenerative agriculture or practices are to be applied. So can you again show this map and explain it?
Sorry, do you mean this map?
Share your screen again.
Sorry.
Мы ее пока не видим.
Выведите пока, пожалуйста, на экран.
So can you show this again?
Yes, let me know. This map?
No. I think it is here. It is Costa Rica. Costa Rica map.
Yes. This one?
It's not a map. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. In this case, as in the other cases, from the different countries which were involved in the sequestration potential initiative, these maps have been generated at the national scale by different national institutions and then submit to the Global Soil Partnership to generate the global product. You will find, if you want, the different institutions which were part of the initiative, for example, in Russia, in the technical report, which is uploaded in the GSP page. In this case, just to be brief, what it represents is the soil organic carbon sequestration potentials in terms of tons of carbon per hectares, showing in the different agricultural areas, and this involve croplands plus grasslands, where we can have lower or higher sequestration potentials in terms of tons of carbon per hectare. This has been generated by simulating and projecting different scenarios using soil organic carbon models like the VOC model by projecting carbon input increases into the soils at different rates depending on the country. By default, countries were using a 5, 10, and 20% increase in carbon inputs to soil, and 3 scenarios, a low, medium, and high scenario, were generated where soil organic carbon changes were projected, simulated, and thus the sequestration potential was estimated for each 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, and then the results were aggregated to estimate the potential in terms of the total area of croplands and grasslands for each country.
Спасибо большое. Насколько возможно с вашей стороны поделиться такой картой для России, которая, как вы сказали, тоже есть?
As for this map, how can we work with the map of Russia, which you have already said really exists?
Yes, the map of Russia, it's have already been submitted. It can be downloaded from this page, from this link in the here in this link in glosses. You can download the map of an individual country or the global map, and then work with the results of each country. So you will find there, as we said, a business as usual scenario. What happens in the next 20 years if the current practices are maintained, and 3 additional, let's call improved scenarios where carbon inputs are increased. And you can download that from there and generate the statistics there. You can also find the global technical report at that link. And we hope it's useful to generate your projects.
Спасибо. Коллеги, есть?
Thank you very much. Do you have any other questions?
Мы к этому пришли, в общем-то, однозначно. Вот и ваши исследования, и наши говорят об этом. Но переход на эти технологии достаточно непростой.
Well, actually, we see the profits of no-till and conservation agriculture, but it is very difficult to transfer from one technology to another. If we analyze literature, if we actually if we take practices, what other technologies except for no-till would you recommend that can increase the sequestration of carbon? So not only no-till, but others, or what other technologies would you recommend?
Okay, so the different practices, of course, if we analyze it in a global point of view, there have been different practices which have been proposed to foster carbon sequestration, depending on the productive systems. In extensive systems like you can find in Russia, like we are facing in Argentina, practices to increase soil organic carbon sequestration are focused on no-till and a combination of different practices, such as including cover crops on the rotations, legumes, and a combination of legume and grasses as cover crops, fertilizer, and managing fertilizer, properly managing fertilizer to increase crop inputs and crop residues, and then carbon sequestration, and other useful practices like, for example, combining lay or pastures into annual rotations to increase carbon sequestration have been showing important increases in soil organic carbon sequestration in these extensive systems, in no-till systems in Argentina.
Спасибо большое, Гильермо.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a written question.
Я не такой уж сильный специалист. Да, пожалуйста.
Владимир Платонов, Самарский университет. Если мы говорим про вашу организацию...
If we speak about your organization, so who are the members of your organization and who actually does the expert work on your projects? So who are the members of your organization and who does the expertise of the projects you are conducting?
So these projects depend on FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and within FAO, the Global Soil Partnership is acting as the institution which is in charge of the development of these projects. this global soil partnership is integrated by different institutions from around the world and has different experts from scientific experts and scientific committees that are acting as support for the different initiatives like INSI, the institution, the International Network of Soils Institutions. So the Global Soil Partnership acts with the focal points of FAO within each country, and these reg soil projects are linked to the FAO office in each country, and then the national institutions like the Ministry of Agriculture or local institutions are part of these local reg soil projects. So it acts like a huge, let's say, network, but these reg soil projects and these initiatives work always in a bottom-up approach.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Now
for
we
your
have
question.
some questions from the chat. Guillermo, we know very well long-term scenarios you are working with, but what if we speak about these scenarios, taking into consideration the new sanctions that have been imposed on Russian oil exports, will this have any impact?
No, these scenarios have not taken into consideration those scenarios and those changes. These maps have been started and have been produced since 2019 and during 2020. So these scenarios have not been taken into consideration. These scenarios are purely considering the effects of increasing carbon inputs into the soil by implementing different practices. And a general methodology was proposed, and countries were, and the experts from the different countries which were involved were able to generate those maps, and the methodologies were available for countries to use it, to modify and to improve and to generate their own scenarios if they want.
But okay, thank you very much. Do you have any other questions? Thank you very much for your report. We have some questions in the chat. We will send it to you. So can you answer to them in writing? Yeah, you probably can see them there. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, again, thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Guillermo. Коллеги, добрый день. Меня зовут Анастасия Аристархова. Я старший менеджер.
Hey colleagues, good morning. My name is Anastasia Aristarkova. I'm senior manager of Ernst & Young. And I will begin. In my company, I'm working with issues related to carbon regulations and with related topics. And this is exactly the thing that I'm going to touch upon in my presentation today.
Да, соответственно, как уже не раз за конференцию говорилось,
it was pronounced more than once today that combating climate changes requires from the local market and local legislation timely adaptations. And today, Russia forms both the carbon regulations and the mechanisms for the system of trading carbon credits, i.e. the carbon credits which will be received after implementation of climatic projects. And it is expected that the national mechanism will start functioning in autumn of this year. And directly after that, it will be possible to expect the first show transactions. At the same time, we see that the Russian business community has an active request for the creation of conditions and development of climatic projects, including the projects aimed at achieving the corporate carbon neutrality and direct monetization of carbon credits. On the international level, there appears an understanding that climatic changes, that in the issues of climatic changes, agriculture is not only one of the emitters of CO2, but also is one of the key solutions. And it is because of that, today we are speaking about the agriculture as capable of becoming the source of technologies, removing the greenhouse gases from atmosphere with their subsequent deposition in the soil. And this is the basis, this is the demand for modern agroclimatic projects. At the same time, when national carbon regulations are being developed, when climatic projects are being developed, it is important to consider the international experience. Not only the international experience relating to climatic projects, but also relating specifically to agriculture, because agriculture has its own specifics. In particular, we understand that the majority of systems of emissions control do not cover emissions from agriculture. And so this market, this industry is not regulated with the credit trade. However, some of them take carbon credits as liabilities of the performer. At the same time, in many countries, including Russia, the attitude to agricultural complex, with respect to agricultural complex, there are specific measurements of state support, including the unified agriculture tax in Russia and some other subsidies or grants. And on the whole, we have an understanding that this is one of the measures of support of climatic projects that is seen by the Ministry of Economic Development as a way of supporting these climatic projects with subsidies and grants, and it is in the process of development at the moment. When we speak about the mechanisms that exist with request to voluntary carbon market, we will need to mention that many projects are implemented not quite in the way they are implemented in other sectors, but through special programs. For example, many manufacturers of fertilizers, for example, Yara or Bayer or Nutrium, they develop their own programs under which they cooperate with farmers and implement their agroclimatic projects aimed at changing the farming techniques and farming methodologies to make them more carbon neutral. Speaking about the existing experience of implementing such projects, we will need to look the other projects, and we will see in the diagram on the right, you will see that some projects were implemented in China or in India. And if we looked at the methodologies employed in these projects, in the already completed projects, we will see that the majority of them are aimed at the changes of methodology in growing rice. So it becomes clear from here that China implemented the majority of these projects. And on the second and third places would be methodologies related to implementation of carbon sequestration practices and methods. The specialized programs that are in place usually operate in the way represented on this slide. For example, there is the carbon program Agoro, implemented by Yara. And this is what makes the implementation of such programs different from implementation of other programming standards. First, we can see that the initiator of the proponent of the project is the company Yara. It's the owner. It engages farms that implement the practices recommended by Yara, and usually it's done through specialized IT solutions. Yarma, for example, has its own platform, Agoro, and there are other examples. For example, Bayer and Nutrium have their own platforms, which are used to ensure information exchange, to exchange experience, and to provide some portion of monitoring. And so it happens that the climatic project is implemented physically by the farmers, and it is certified and formalized and verified and validated by the owner of the project. In our case, the manufacturer of fertilizers, in this case Yara, and the farmers are financed depending on the project in different ways, depending on the areas on which they implement the practices recommended by Yara. One more thing that makes these kind of projects special is that at the same time there are independent laboratories performing tests and studies of the soils. So it considering the specifics of climatic projects in the agricultural sphere that we mentioned, there appears a question: would it be enough? Would the demand be sufficient for the current projects in the world? There is no one answer to these questions, but there are initiatives. There are processes that can make the Russian agroclimatic projects be in demand worldwide, and these mechanisms are being contemplated by the Ministry of Economic Development. Such companies from Eurasian Economic Union and Shanghai Organization of Cooperation and BRICS want to attract investors to the Russian market. A standardization of methodologies and approaches to verification and monitoring and subsequent confirmation and issue of carbon credits, but among other mechanisms would be to secure the motivation of the buyers or investors to buy these carbon credits. If we look at the international experience, at the existing international experience, one of the options would be the integration of the national system of emissions trade and the possibility of providing the offset of liabilities in the system of emission trade by buying and settling these obligations with carbon credits. There can be bilateral or multilateral mechanisms similar to those existing in China, where around 50% of liabilities is offset by using the carbon credits. international cooperation that would enable offsetting the carbon credits from other countries. They're still not in place, but it is a point worth considering. There are no formal obstacles for such systems. The legislation, however, has to be modified this way. For example, in South Africa and in Colombia, they have obligations in carbon tax that can be fully or partially settled by voluntarily procured carbon credits. This is, therefore, they are not limited with any geographical boundaries. Same thing could be provided for in our legislation. Another mechanism would be creating bilateral or multilateral mechanisms. For example, similar to the mechanism of joint credited mechanism in Japan and countries of Eastern Asia. A similar national standard could be created in Russia. Japan and countries of Eastern Asia implement their projects, and depending on the involvement of companies from the region, they do co-financing and they buy a share in the carbon credits. Of course, there can be there can be projects and mechanisms organized under the second paragraph of Article 6.2 of the Paris Convention. Another thing that I referred to a little earlier, there might be mechanisms of development of carbon preserving farming. There are companies manufacturing fertilizers, and similar mechanisms could be used within Russia and within partnering countries, such as Brazil, for example. And we can think about creating similar mechanisms involving the public authorities. Of course, it's necessary to make these mechanisms cover not only agroclimatic projects, but climatic projects in general, and to take into account the specifics of development of carbon regulation in all potentially participating countries, because we understand that in different countries, on different levels, carbon regulation is developed to different levels. In China or in Kazakhstan, there exist systems of emission control. In China, there are several national mechanisms of carbon credits, and in Russia or in Brazil, the situation is only on the stage of formation. But even today, it is possible to take these possibilities into consideration. Both us and governments face some ambitious tasks which need to be solved at the moment. And on the stage of development of relevant regulations and concepts, it will be necessary to consider the interests of companies which plan to implement the agroclimatic projects, to have obvious stimuli for their development. So this is the general content of my presentation. Any questions to our presenter, please? In Margarita's report, there was a very detailed scheme, a complicated one and an expensive one. On this slide of yours, you can see the farmers as some of consumers. We know some farmers who have 5,000 hectares, they are successful, and they sponsor universities, but the majority of our farmers are much smaller, so to say. Maybe it will be worth our while to develop some standardized packages? Well, all these standards need to be unified to the maximum. And from the standpoint of their scale and from the standpoint of the countries which might participate in them, the benefit for the farmers is different. But if we looked at the existing mechanisms, we would see that they are oriented at America, where all the farmers are engaged are not small, and they achieve their goals in verification, that the verification itself is done not by the farmer, but by the company which recommends this program. In my example, it was Yara, and these expenses will be on Yara's side, and they will be compensated through the receipt of carbon credits. So the farmers will have less burden on them, but considering that this has to be standardized, it is a task that needs working on right now. More questions? You have contacts with Chinese companies that are ready to buy carbon credits. Do you have any contacts with Chinese and Indian companies? The thing is to understand what is the company's motivation to buy these carbon credits. And we need to distinguish between the regulated markets. There, the motivation is quite clear, but considering China in its current context, in their system of monitoring the emission control. In China, you can settle with carbon credits that were made, that were provided using Chinese regulatory mechanisms. So it's somewhat difficult to speak about taking their experience. We will need to create our regulations in this area. If we were to speak about voluntary markets, about companies buying carbon credits in order to settle their corporate responsibility and liability on carbon neutrality based on their strategies, we will be able to see that the buyers on voluntary markets would be the companies from Europe and from America. And the main standard would be BCI. And this is the direction which is closed for Russia due to current geopolitical situation. And we can hardly expect high demand from countries like America and European Union. So we will need to create a regulatory demand and to maintain it. Thank you. Thank you. Any more questions? I have two questions. So you represent a foreign company. Don't you have a feeling that the international climatic agenda is somewhat shifted to the side due to certain events? Today, you saw that the Green Party in London blamed London for not keeping up with the agenda. And you said that this global agenda is going down to the level of countries. And you have had the example of China and rice. For example, there was one country which refused buying rice on the international market and started growing their own rice. So maybe the project on rice that you mentioned was exactly related to this. Well, I represent a Russian company which is owned by an international network. That's a clarification. I would add that all the plans on the green agenda are being changed. And when the European Parliament was voting for the Fit for 55 project last Tuesday, and one of the points was the trade of emissions in the EU. This regulation was not adopted, and it was sent for completions. There were lots of discussions because there are too many stakeholders and their interests are very different. And I would agree in saying that many questions in this agenda need to be resolved locally. And you are perfectly right in giving China as an example. They created a new mechanism of carbon credits. So this was one of the points on the agenda for China that they consider extremely important. And I think that that this agenda is now given to regulation by specific countries.
Подумать про направление статьи 6, да, вот пункта 2 про совместные механизмы, мы видим, что, например, Швейцария уже активно над этим работает, именно там с африканскими, например, странами. То есть, с одной стороны, да, сейчас, наверное...
are developing, and however the situation is quite complicated, but there are opportunities. There are different ways we can follow. So colleagues, if you don't have any questions, we will announce the resolution. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vasilev, the head of the Department of Ecology of the University of Samara. Usually we begin the resolution with points that state actually some basic points, but in fact during the day we have already discussed all of them. So I will move to the solutions and to the recommendations we have got. So that is the resolution. First of all, the participants addressed the Ministry of the Russian Federation of Agriculture to take measures to support conservation agriculture technologies. And the following solutions have been proposed. We actually decided to say not only conservation agriculture, but also carbon agriculture. First of all, it is necessary to increase the subsidies to support the carbon agriculture step by step. It is necessary to provide technological support. And first of all, we already said at least commercial subsidies. Then we have crediting on special terms of agricultural for farmers according to this technology. Then it is governmental support for soil analysis. Then it is the network of consultation centers on carbon farming that will be by the Ministry of Agriculture. And then it is the development of integral systems of decision support to integrate innovative technologies. The real practice, we have already discussed them, and we have had presentations, but probably it is necessary to have an integrated system. Next, to organize integrated research on soil carbon using technologies to study conservation agriculture technologies and its influence on soil carbon. The next point, it is necessary to work on the courses to educate new specialists in conservation agriculture. The next point is necessary to study the possibility of implementing protocol and assessing risks, and then it is necessary to set an open database that will allow to have most adequate solutions on improving soil health and technology. The next point, the conference is addressing to the Ministry of Agriculture and to support the following points. So first of all, we ask for support in support for farmers who are implementing conservation agricultural technologies. The next is to stimulate the manufacturing of Russian technologies, Russian equipment, software, and chemical fertilizers and other treatments that are to be used in the conservation agriculture technologies. Then the conference addresses to the Ministry of Higher Education in order to support the following points. First of all, we ask to support the network of carbon conservation agriculture polygons based on farms that implement conservation agricultural technologies for the period of less than 5 years. Then we ask to work out standards on the methods to measure and to assess the results of soil carbon sequestration while implementing no-till, cover crops, and other conservation agricultural technologies that are aimed at increasing soil carbon and decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. Then the conference addresses to the government of the Russian Federation to support the points. So we ask to support us in setting a working group that will deal with conservation agriculture implementing. It will also deal with elaborating memory protocol. It will also work with special programs for carbon polygons to open. Then we ask to support the measures to manufacture and produce carbon neutral food and improve the quality of food products. We also ask to support us in implementing agricultural technology in order to save the soil fertility. And in order to do that, we ask the technological and legal support for those companies and farmers who support and apply conservation agricultural technologies. We also ask the government to organize a council on the sustainable management of soil, as we need to save the future of our soils from our generations. And that is to be the topic of the council to be organized. And we can see, I would like to comment that this was one of the topics that was to be discussed at the G8 summit, and I hope that this topic will be addressed in Russia as well. And I also have my own comment. In the Global South Partnership, there is a prize of Lincoln. He's a well-known scientist, and this prize is given to the organizations who have approved themselves to be active in soil institution technologies. So I think that it is necessary to provide links between FAO, and I think that we should nominate our national movement for the conservation agriculture for this prize, and I think that it will help us improve our relations with the international community. Thank you. So if you do not have any comments, I hope this should also be included into the resolution. Now I want to give the floor to the representative of the Russian Institute of Geography, Russian Academy of Sciences, who will have her word. I would like to thank all the participants, and I hope that the resolution will be published, and the results will be very useful as well. So we propose the following. We propose the establishment of the working group to elaborate the MRV protocol on soil carbon sequestration and gas emissions to be assessed. Besides, we ask to organize research platforms to study the processes of greenhouse gases fluxes and soil carbon fluxes as well. The major goals of this is to, first of all, analyze approaches. And then the next goal is to coordinate different types of measurements of soil carbon to assess carbon fluxes in the atmosphere in the soil. Our third goal is to have a digital platform that will calculate automatically this. The fourth goal is on calculating soil carbon.
Почечно-органического углерода
to calculate carbon units when implementing a greenhouse gas, when implementing conservation technologies. The next goal is to work out the software that will calculate the volumes of carbon and credits when implementing carbon farming. The next goal is to establish a system of validation and verification to calculate carbon and greenhouse gases. We have the number of people included in the working group. Published after the conference. It is also proposed to include Natalia and Mr. Vasinov if there are no objections. Thank you, Olga Valentina. There are no contradictions. I have one comment because we have some other polygons that are specialized on the dragon agriculture. and we actually are interested
Да,
in
конечно, я думаю, что если есть предложения, их надо высылать.
they probably be included. So
Спасибо.
we will deal with this during our discussions.
Дистанционно, наверное, подключен. И, может, Самарского университета тоже есть желающие включиться в эту рабочую группу.
Probably there are some people from the Samara State University. There are people who would like to be included in the group.
Мы это обговорим отдельно. Хорошо.
Это еще для обсуждения.
Мгм.
Спасибо, коллеги. Еще предложения?
Do you have any other?
Если предложений нет, коллеги,
If there are no, now we will finish our conference. I'm giving the floor to Людмила Орлова.
Спасибо большое. Я бы хотел поблагодарить организаторов в первую очередь.
I would like to thank for all the organizers for this event.
Второй день, завтра будет третий день,
This is the
наверное,
second day, and then we will have the third day where we will test the application of drones in agriculture. And I think that
по максимуму, я уж не буду говорить, насколько по максимуму, надеюсь, что по максимуму.
I hope that it will be implemented. I don't know how much, but I hope that it is still be very efficient.
Благодарю всех за участие, спикеров, модераторов, Антон Павловича, что он к нам приехал. И,
I would like to thank all the participants, all the organizers of the conference. And so I think the conference was quite successful. And there are about 100 online and
ожидали, что это будет 500.
although there were so many people in spite of a great number of people, in spite of the difficulty of the topics, and all that shows that it is that there is a great interest of people toward this topic. We will publish next week all the materials to be published on the Agri Commission platform, and the presentations and the slides will also be published.
Еще, конечно, хочется выразить надежду, что вот
And I would also like to express our hope that three ministries that are important for the spread of this technology will help us. These are the ministries of economy, of education, of education and science, and probably they will be united. So at last we can promote these technologies. Yesterday, for example, we had a discussion between the farmers, and they showed that this technology is not efficient. So we have the proof, and that's why we need to foster this technology. We should also think about our future generation. That's why we should not only speak, we should also act. Because soils are actually our major treasure, and we should try to preserve it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is the end of the conference. Till next time. Да.